Good morning, good afternoon and good day to you all. Welcome to Chapter 2, Search for Mr. Hyde. We are going to be completing all of our annotations on this chapter. So the first quote I'm going to look at is this one. It's about Mr. Utterson. He's at home. Now actually I got this annotation from a lovely book that shout out to George here. He recommended this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde quotation bank. I wasn't sure how it's going to be. I think it's brilliant, and it gives you guidance on the exam, and then it goes through a whole bunch of quotes from the entire book, and it gives you like that really in-depth analysis. And I think this really proves my point of how I always harp on about 3 methods per quote. You can do it. Look, they've done it. And I'm going to steal this one quote that they've chosen from chapter 2. I'm going to incorporate it in the annotation we're making on it here. So what this quote overall shows us from the "until the clock of the neighbouring church rang out," this shows that Utterson has structure and routine in his life, unlike Hyde/Jekyll, who obviously goes out in the early hours of the morning. What a wild child. We can also look at the word sounds, the dry divinity. That alliteration there, by all means you can say it's plosive. But dry divinity, what it's referring to is kind of like religious restrictions, because a volume is that's the Bible, and this is also typifying that Christian 19th century sort of man and what he would be expected to do with his life. The material he's reading is also a volume, and if it's a volume, that it suggests that there's even more volumes that offer rules and restrictions on how one should live life. So it's like part of a series on rules of how to live. I'm going to say a moral life. And also it's very interesting, there's some symbolism here. He waits until the clock of the neighbouring church rang out the hour of 12. So the church obviously being a symbol of religion and Christianity, but the fact that that is the thing that tells him when to go to bed, it shows that church dictates, so commands, when he sleeps. He then goes and looks at the will because he actually can't get to sleep. Sat down with a clouded brow. It's a metaphor because he hasn't actually got clouds around his brow, but what it really means is his confusion, haziness, like in his head, about the whole will and the whole kind of nature of it. He then reads the will and that everything goes to Hyde. This part is the most interesting, that it specifies in the will that it depends on the disappearance or unexplained absence. Now, for those of you who have been watching Tiger King, you will know that it's very, very bizarre, especially in the case of Carol Baskin, to find in a will that it says, should I disappear for the excess of 3 calendar months? Normally it just says, upon my death. But for it to be disappearance, there is something very, very suspicious about that. Like, no one plans on disappearing. No one ever expects to disappear or have an unexplained absence. This would suggest that the will is manipulated in some way. Let's go to the next page. Don't worry about the yellow highlighting as always. This belonged to a previous student, so I'm just choosing the best bits. Out of the shifting, insubstantial mist that so long baffled his eye, there leaped up a sudden definite presentment of a fiend. Fiend kind of being devilish. Hyde is always described in this way, aggressive as well. The mists, again, it's another metaphor. It's that idea of clouded judgment. He's confused, lack of clarity. He can't see the situation for what it is, yet. And then on to the next bit. We get Dr. Lanyon. It's important for every single character to have at least one quote that we can sort of revert back to for how they were first described. This is the best quotes for Dr. Lanyon. He is a hearty, healthy, dapper, red-faced gentleman, boisterous and decided in manner. In other words, from this use of listing, of positive attributes it's almost like he is endlessly joyful, and particularly using words like healthy, this is a massive contrast to, as we know, his illness later after seeing Hyde. And this emphasises even further how disturbing that experience must have been, because it's not like Hyde revealed himself to some like weak-willed man who didn't have that much of a backbone. He was a hearty, healthy, dapper, jolly. So it emphasises destructive impact of Hyde. Just no need to annotate, but you and I must be the two oldest friends that Henry Jekyll has. Just important to remember that that is the position that Utterson and Lanyon have in his life. And then these are lovely quotes about why Lanyon and Jekyll fell out. He began to go wrong in the mind. And why? Because he was spouting out such unscientific balderdash. We're going to go into who those people are. Repetition of wrong. It's almost like he can't get over it because he's mulling on how wrong it is in the mind. Perhaps insanity is to play there. Unscientific balderdash. Loads of you chose this for your vocab words. Of course, balderdash means nonsense for those of you who didn't choose it but still not sure what it means. Unscientific. And he says it would have estranged Damon and Pythias. Now, to cut a long story short, there are two friends from this legendary Greek tale, and I won't go into details, but essentially their tale is all about sacrificing something of yourself for a friend. So they both mutually are willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of their friend. So they are like the bestest of best friends in all of human history. And Lanyon's saying the amount of unscientific balderdash Jekyll was saying, it would have estranged, it would have torn apart even Damon and Pythias. That is how bad his science was. So estranged means to make a stranger of. So it would have torn them apart. I'm going to highlight a few little words around here. He then goes home to a dark bed. It is night time. There is darkness. And oh look, darkness. It's a nocturnal, nighttime city. So there is a semantic field of dark throughout this part, constantly repeated, and that obviously has connotations of evil, foreboding, the literal dark side, the Hyde side. I've just put a star here just in case you ever need to find it again. This is the part where we have his nightmare, and it continues over here onto the next page. I like this quote, the low growl of London. This is where he starts to stalk out Mr. Hyde. And, here's the best quote in the whole book. The low growl is quite animalistic, like Hyde. And think about, why do animals do a low growl? Again, your knowledge of Tiger King will help you here. It's the precursor to a bigger attack. It's a warning sign, usually a low growl of like, get away from me now, and then if you comply, it will back off. So again, there is this foreboding, like even London is turning dark with the turn of Jekyll into Hyde. And then he meets Mr. Hyde, and this is where we get the really, really important bits of description. He was small and very plainly dressed. Why is Hyde small? It's the idea that evil side has been shut up within Jekyll for so long, so it never grew. It never was given that opportunity, and that is why Hyde is so small. And then these absolutely fantastic verbs down here, and yes, it is animalistic imagery, as this former student has said. Mr. Hyde shrank back with a hissing intake of the breath. Hissing is also, it's snakes, and we could link that to Garden of Eden, with the snake representing temptation. And in a way, that is what Hyde is as well. It's the temptation to sin and not be like the classic Victorian gentleman. Shrank back again links to his smallness. It's always important to remember that. Mr. Utterson of Gaunt Street. I think there is something to make of this. This is where Mr. Utterson lives, and the word gaunt means thin and haggard due to suffering, perhaps stress, and maybe this is foreshadowing of what discovering this case will do to Utterson. We never actually see it happen in the book, but we certainly see it happen to Lanyon. We can only imagine that similar will happen to Utterson too. Foreshadowing of effects of the case on Utterson. He is going to be literally of Gaunt Street. He's going to become gaunt and thin and haggard. We talked about this in the plot summary video. You should have my address, is what Mr. Hyde says, and Mr. Utterson thinks, can he have been thinking of the will? So there's quite sinister undertones of why he gives the address. The only reason he would give the address is if he thinks Jekyll will die soon, because Utterson is the enforcer of the will. So once Jekyll dies or disappears for 3 months, that is when he will need to contact the person who is inheriting everything at their address to then give them everything. We've got more animalistic imagery here. He snarled, his Hyde aloud in a savage laugh and then disappears into the house. I also like to link this to what Mr. Utterson says here. And also here we have our first clue about the Jekyll and Hyde link, because Utterson does lie and say that, Jekyll told me about you. And then Hyde cries, he never told you. I do not think you would have lied. And the only reason Hyde would know that Jekyll never told him about Hyde is because Hyde is Jekyll. Utterson says that is not fitting language. The other snarled aloud into a savage laugh, almost like hitting back. Like, if you're saying I'm not got fitting language, I'm not going to even use words or vocabulary at all. It's a very kind of defiant, that's the word I'm looking for. It's a defiant retort. Doesn't use language at all. It's animalistic. Shows that Hyde is primitive, and this can link to Darwin's theory of evolution. As you learn about in the context, there is this idea that Hyde is a regress back into a more primitive form of the human race, into something more animalistic. We've also got the use of sibilants, snarled and savage. And as we know, the go-to thing for sibilants, not always, but most of the time, is there is a sense of discomfort for the reader and probably Utterson as well. You know, don't know if you've ever been snarled at. A bit weird. Pale and dwarfish, again, this is Hyde. He gave an impression of deformity without any nameable malformation. A sort of murderous mixture of timidity and boldness. He spoke with a husky, whispering and somewhat broken voice. All these together could explain he disgust, loathing and fear with which Mr. Utterson regarded him. I'm not going to go into dwarfish. We've already talked about why he's small. Pale, though. The only reason you would be pale is if you don't go outside much. So this shows that he hides indoors during day and probably only comes out at night. You could say, yeah, there is like an aura of evil. The idea of him being deformed links to the idea of physiognomy from context. So if he's got, he looks deformed on the outside, then he must be deformed personality-wise within. The murderous mixture, that is foreshadowing, because he does commit murder later on. Husky, whispering, somewhat broken voice. Perhaps he's out of practice because the dark side was shut away for so long. And the use of a triplet here, disgust, loathing and fear. It's kind of got that listing quality to it, that this very kind of volatile reaction is endless. Like there are just not the amount of words, or you could just go on forever with the kind of reaction Hyde causes in other people. God bless me The man seems hardly human. Interesting. God bless me. We've got that religion in there. It's also an imperative. He needs a holy saviour, like that extreme, to save him from this hardly human man. He also says that he's troglodytic. I love this word. It comes from the word troglodyte, and a troglodyte is a cave dweller. So it's that, again, that primitive side of Mr. Hyde. And again, we can link that to Darwin and the theory of evolution beliefs going around at the time as well. If ever I read Satan's signature upon a face, it is of that of your new friend. Satan's signature, again, evil, like pure evil. Like Hyde is created by the very devil himself. And then he goes over to Dr. Jekyll's house, and his house wore a great air of wealth and comfort, though it was now plunged in darkness. It's about the house. It's a metaphor for how Jekyll is now plunged in darkness, evil, and also it's that idea of the outside reflecting the inside, even with the housing as well as the physical appearance of the characters themselves. So again, it's a link to After the Fashion of Country House. Did I want any of this? No, I don't actually. Skip that page. Interesting things to learn about Dr. Jekyll. He was wild when he was young. The ghost of some old sin. His past was fairly blameless. So it is about the duality, and this is proof that Dr. Jekyll may be being blackmailed by Hyde from Utterson's belief. Nice that it's the ghost of some old sin, so like Jekyll haunted by past mistakes. But what is then interesting to know is that Jekyll, we're nearly there guys, was humbled to the dust by many ill things he had done and raised up again to a sober and fearful gratitude. So this is how Dr. Jekyll changed over time. He was humbled to the dust by the many ill things he had done and raised up again. It's kind of like redemption. So he's trying to excuse Jekyll by saying, yes, he was wild once, yes, he did sin in the past, but he regrets what he did, and now he's raised up again, and it's all fine. And then just a nice thing to highlight, but we don't need to annotate it. If this Hyde suspects the existence of the will, he may grow impatient to inherit. And this is Mr. Utterson's greatest fear. Lovely, all done.